Hello, everybody, and welcome to UX and Layout Design. I'm going to be your moderator for this afternoon, evening, or whatever time zone you are in. Ambrose, I go by she, they pronouns. I am a UX designer, have been for 8 years, and I have also been a TTRPG performer for 7 years. I'm award winning now, which is an amazing thing to note. But that's enough about me. Let's introduce our panelists right now because they're the people that are going to be talking the most. Start off with Javier, please.
Okay. Hello, my name is Javier Beltran. I am currently a graphic designer at Monica Games. I do layout and a variety of graphics that we need alongside my art director, Bear Wider. And I've been doing graphic design and layout for a number of years now. I'd say about like 5 to 6 in tabletop. And I'm happy to chat with y'all.
Awesome. And Basil.
Everyone, I'm Basil. My pronouns are he, they, z, like it says on the screen. I am a game designer and sensitivity consultant. I've been doing both for 2 or 3 years. Time is a soup, but I'm here and I'm doing things and I'm happy to be on this panel.
Awesome. And Zoe.
Hi everyone, I am Zoe. God, immediately forgot everything. This happens all the time if you ever see me anywhere else. I am a game designer and I'll say like radical imagination specialist that does a lot of things. I do a lot of things, but I mostly started in game design with a focus on basically like accessibility and like vibes.
All right. And Radiant G.
Hello everyone, my name is Radiant G, my pronouns are he, him. I am the site lead of the worker-run games journalism website, Press Space to Jump, and I am also the producer on 2 upcoming indie games, Himbo Hunter and Ink Inside, and I am also involved in the TTRPG space. I'm currently on an actual play of Pathfinder 2e that is based on Legend of Zelda, where I am playing a Zora bard by the name of Edward Swimmerhands.
I love that so much.
Real.
But this is our amazing panelists that we have right now. We're going to jump right into it. I'm going to just give a nice little rundown first. We're going to be doing a deep dive into user-centered layout design and how we can look at TTRPGs with a more user-friendly lens going forward. And as well as why it's necessary to keep that in mind when designing, because we're not just designing for us, we're designing for people that enjoy this stuff, people that want to get into it, and also want to drop that barrier of entry so that they can enjoy it. But quick recap on UX or user experience design. UX design is described as a relationship a person, the user, has with a specific product, service, or interface. The goal for a UX designer is to create a user-friendly experience that is tailored to the intended user or said product. That same thing goes for designing a game for the users that are playing it, such as storytellers or GMs or players or cast. That's extremely important. As you can see, we have a wonderful example of something that does not isn't taken in the way you intended it would be, especially when it comes to pizza or New York slice pizza. Cowabunga, dude. So say no, say yes to drugs, to pizza. Curious. That's an example, but just a little touch of that. So we're going to start with our first question, which is, what does bad design and organization do for the overall experience of a TTRPG? And I'm going to open up the floor to that if anyone is interested or feels a light in their fire, in their belly about this.
I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start and say that tabletop games have a uniquely demanding needs in terms of typography and font, because often they'll have things like tables, charts, images alongside text, and various types of formatting within that text. Terms are in bold, terms are in italics. So if you don't have good organization skills, you're gonna confuse people and it's gonna look like a hot mess. You're not just talking about a couple of words, that on a poster with pizza, you're talking about, diagrams and explanations and rules.
Yeah. it makes it so unbelievably hard to read. I mean, like just with table, like the games themselves. I know I personally cannot read, like will not can like input any of the information if I can't read it or if it's hurting my eyes. I'm not going to want to go back to looking at it. I'm not going to want to like understand. I'm just going to close the book. And it happens all the time. Often my friends will see me be like, okay, let me go look at this game. And then I open it and it's like bright orange background, really hard to read words. And I'm like, actually, I don't need to play this.
Yeah, honestly, I'm gonna bounce off of you right there and say, yeah, honestly, it is one of the biggest barriers to entry. I'm dyslexic, so if something is hard to read, normal things are already hard to read for me. So it becomes extra hard for me to read, and there will be so many times where I just cannot figure out the rules to a system or to a game, and it's just not worth it to me. And I will just say, I guess this game is not for me. It was not made with people like me in mind. I'm not gonna suffer to try to play this game.
Yeah, I think to build on that, one of the things with organization is like, it should make sense as you're reading it. Like we've been saying, there's so many times where you look at a product and it's like maybe there's bookmarks, maybe there's not bookmarks, but like if I have to get out file tabs and sticky notes and make my own bookmarks, I do feel like that's a failing of the product. Like you have not successfully managed to capture potential player or even just a reader. Like, if this is causing too much mental fatigue, then, already, I have dyscalculia. So it's like I already have to deal with the numbers, but now it's also not in like a feasible order. It's like, okay, well, I'm gonna put this aside. Or if I really have the free time, sometimes if it's a PDF, I will just move the pages around myself. But it's like, no one should have to get to that point. It's one thing if it's like it's already organized, but you want to have it to your own system, that's fine. But like if I have to like actually move it to make it better for like my group of friends who want to play, then that's kind of it's a failing.
I agree with that. And I would say that also, when it comes down to having to jump between different books, a lot of that, having different books to jump to, having several tabs open because I'm more digital, right? If I have more than two, I'm going to have an issue. Three is like pushing it. But if I have five, which I just had to do, by the way, for a particular game that I will not name here. But that was difficult. It was really difficult doing the character creation, which to me, that's like the easiest thing that should be happening to get started. The hardest part should be maybe the mechanics and figuring out how that works. But that's just games. Like figuring out how a game works shouldn't take that long. We have our first question from the audience. What are some good examples of information architecture, which is good UX in TTRPG games? And if anyone needs just to know what information architecture is, it's just literally the structure of something so that like when you walk through it, it makes sense to you naturally. Your brain can breathe a sigh of relief versus doing what I just described, which is jumping around to find where everything is.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is considered within a game directly, but I'm just gonna throw out there that D&D Beyond is a godsend. Like when it comes to either like just playing the game with friends or teaching someone who's new to the system how to play D&D, having that website is just, it's so nice. It walks you through it page by page, making your character all the information you need at that particular moment, but not everything all at once. It's just it's really nice. So if you've been intimidated by playing D&D and you want to give it a try, check out D&D Beyond. It's really well structured.
I think I primarily come from like the more analog print side of things. Although we handle digital PDFs, of course. Monica Games started a lot of making PDFs a while back, and even bookmarking and indexing them. But just to talk about the information architecture, I think it's important to understand how a book works. Table of contents at the front, indices are really vital. I know sometimes they can go at the front as like a monster index to quickly reference things. We include indices at different stages, and also sometimes you have to mix the information up, right? So this could be indexed by genre, and you could be indexing the same information just in different ways, because often people need that versatility to go back through a complex document. So maybe for some of our designers, their games are not going to be 300 plus pages long. In our audience, maybe they're going to be more indie designers, but an index of terms that can quickly show where important things are. Those things are just classic sort of UX, right? They're classic information architecture that go back, hundreds of years, and can be really helpful.
Does anyone else have any other
One thing-
thing?
sorry.
Go. No, go for it.
I was just gonna say, I think one of the things that I've really grown to like as I've been doing game design and just looking at other people's products is thank you, brain, for erasing the word for me. But
Don't worry.
examples in
Okay.
the sidebar. Forgot the word sidebar. Sidebar examples. So like as you're going through putting together your game, just thinking of like the natural questions that'll pop up. Like, oh, what does tessering mean? I'm just making this up. I just like Wrinkle in Time. But it's like, what is tessering? And then there's a sidebar off to the side explaining, oh, well, tessering is when you do this, and here's how it would look in gameplay. So, if you have like the real estate available on that page to be able to have those, I think that really is, I think that's, it's good. I like it. I've been using it more, and I feel like it's like, oh, I had a question. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
Like, I think if you can anticipate, like, what someone reading this that's not you will need, it's really helpful.
That's huge.
Anything else there? No? Okay, cool. Next question. There are a few questions that are popping into chat, and that makes me really happy. I will get to them, or try to, in the time we have. Also, thank you for whoever said that my style is awesome. You're wonderful. But how do you break down the content within the TTRPG so that the information can be easily digested? Do you have any insights into that?
Oh, I have one.
Hmm.
So I talked about this last year at Big Bad Con in person, IRL. But I feel like one of the best ways to do this is, look at your work like when you're tired or when you have a migraine. Because then you definitely need to be able to, especially when your head hurts, like you need things explained to you like you are a little babby. Like it needs to be easily digested. So if you're looking at something and it's just, like all of this like wonderful description, but it's really long, but you can't figure out what the point is, I think you can go back through and just make a note for yourself to like break this down, explain this more. Using one of my own games as an example, some people were confused about one of my mechanics, and I thought it was straightforward. But then I looked at it when I got 2 hours of sleep, and I was like, "What does this mean? What was I writing here? Why did I do this?" And so I rewrote it, and then asked the same people, and they were like, "Yes, that is so much clearer." And I'm like, "Okay, there we go."
Yeah. My golden rule, because I have background in education, my golden rule is to basically like, if you can mostly explain it to a 5-year-old, then you're doing really well. In terms of like, what words am I using here? Is a 5-year-old gonna know what pedantic means? Probably not. I barely know what it means personally. So I just like I really just like smaller words, like not smaller words, but like more conciseness. Yeah, like conversational words. I have actually in a lot of my writing just switched to more conversational. Like if I was talking to someone, how would I best explain this? And that's been a really good like self-checker. And also I get other people to read it. Like, hey, does this make sense? And I think in terms of like the digital world, the great tool of like bookmarking things, or being able, if you're doing like a Word document, just like, if I click this, will it take me to the next thing? Because just like Basil was saying earlier, like, and not even just anticipating those questions, but like if you're reading something and the information was not either before there or not immediately after it, how can just make sure that someone can easily get back to it?
Yeah. One thing I'm going to suggest is also, because I think our audience is mainly going to be like game designers themselves and people like that, maybe people working on smaller scale games, is I hope that the game designers especially because I know that ours, like at Monte Cook Games, do understand heading levels and heading hierarchies. And it's something as simple as, you can create this within Google Docs or Word doc or whatever you're working on, is like heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. Understand how those nest together. And, like if you use those within those programs, it kind of automatically creates an outline that you can use where you can see where things are nested. And are they nested logically, right? Like, is something that's about weapons accidentally nested later in combat where maybe it should be nested over an equipment, things like that. Like, I think being able to see that outline and broken down without all the extra body copy that's going to be elaborating things is a really good, useful tool to double check the flow. Yeah.
I agree with both things that have been said already. I think that conversational is always great. I've always had that sort of style when I'm writing. It was one of those things that I was knocked for in high school, but praised for in college. Like, nobody needs to be using huge words all the time. I like to make it conversational in a way that I say is interesting to veterans and accessible to new players. So that's sort of what I go for when I write. And also to go off what you were saying too about hierarchy being important. That's so important. Like, I've also done a lot of graphic design, and making sure that your areas are clear. Like, if you just have a bunch of paragraphs, it's not going to be as accessible as if each one has a huge header in bold font and a bigger font that says what that's about. Because people are going to want to find information quickly.
Yeah.
And then one thing to add on to this that we didn't talk about yet was if you are making a game and you're play testing it, and you find that the people that are testing your game and GMing your game are going over the rules in a different order than you wrote them down, change it to the order that you notice people are teaching it in, because that is going to be the order that's most intuitive to players. It's okay to move things around.
I very much agree with that. I was going to lean towards answering that with like playtester games in terms of breaking down is essentially like bringing someone else in. It doesn't necessarily have to be an official play testing like round, but just in terms of finding out what that flow looks like for your game, because each game's going to be different, finding out what that is and going through it. I would say with an objective eye, but when you're in it, like you might not know. So having someone else that might be somewhat close or understand how TTRPGs work, go through it and point out what they're having frustrations with, and come with an open heart and an open mind about it, because things are going to shift while you're making things, and it's totally okay. So don't be mean when someone's trying to help you. You know what I mean? So we have another question from the audience that I think is really cool. Would plain text or minimum extra design versions be one possible solution for indie designers?
I always want a plain text version.
Yeah.
As someone who's dyslexic, the moment that the information put in front of me is put behind either tiny text or text with tails, like I just won't read it. Like, Times New Roman, please stop using it. We don't. We've progressed past the need for Times New Roman.
That's good to know in terms of like accessibility. Radiant. I'm really curious to know more about that, because it's something we've been exploring a little bit and trying to move towards it. Like, I know internally at Monte Cook Games, and it's not an easy pivot to kind of make things accessible in that way. But I have seen some games where, like, I think it was 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, which is like a really beautiful game to kind of leaf through, right? But everything is done with like analog stuff. And I noticed that the designer also had like a plain text version of it, and I was like, that's smart, because really, like, how else are you gonna read this? That is like, some of it is on like a bits of paper, and some of it's on like scrapbooky type things. It's yeah, I think it might be necessary. It might be the thing about the only thing I think causes a problem there is that you probably have to do it after you've done your completed book. So it adds this extra process of like, once the copy is clean, has been proofread, it's like it's the final version, then it's time to go back and do like the plain text version of that, so that you capture all the correct changes that happen along the way. So,
Yeah. I'm a personal fan of, as a reader, I am a personal fan of plain text. I often, because like I own, I'm sure a lot of us can attest, we own a lot of games on itch. So often when I like am looking for something and I happen to open something and I'm like, oh, this is hard for me to get through for reasons that might not even be fully like the creator's design, I usually can easily find like a plain text version and be like, okay, awesome, I could just like I could read this, control F, like look through this the way I need it to be. Yeah, so I say yes. Good, great solution.
Basil, do you have anything to add? Or
No, it's just a +1 to what everyone's been
yeah, like it was
saying.
just like
You
yeah,
know, like, yeah,
agreed.
it's just- yeah, nod.
I was gonna also say, like, in terms of like extra versions, having like a quick start guide. So if you could just get quickly started, like also plain text is like the first thing I do think of. But I think that's really awesome. So yeah, we'll go to the next question that we have here. What are some do's and don'ts when designing TTRPGs in general? Oh, I felt that.
No, I think about this a lot because I have one. I don't even remember where I got it, but like I was doing work for something that wasn't TTRPGs, and they gave me the app. Put your design through a color blindness like test. Like, please, for the love of God, like just I want everyone do that. Like, put it through a colorblind test. Like, you could, they're always online. I don't know it off the top of my head, but like I found an app on my phone, so I can download my like PDFs and put them through a colorblind test. Because I do a lot of things with colors. Like I use Color Picker, like to at least like do readability, and if I'm using a lot of colors or even just putting it through a colorblind test, it makes it's for everyone. Like when something is colorblind friendly, I know I, as someone who's not colorblind, like have an easier time reading.
Yeah, it's usually about contrast with the colors, having enough contrast. One thing I'll say, like if you're doing a horror game, be careful with red on black.
For the love of God.
Yes.
Red is a dark color. It's and for it to look good, maybe you can get it to orange, but it's still not quite enough contrast. So if you have these fonts that are very thin or they have very small, you're going to run into problems. So I would just notice things like that. So, and getting to like font size is like print something out like at full size, right? Whatever so I guess your book is going to be, and look at what your minimums are, and don't just try to. I know game designers love words. I love you all for it, but don't just try to cram as many words as you can onto a sheet, one page. Like try to give things space, because spaces or make more pages, like make it fit on more pages, because you often need a little more room so that things don't look crowded and busy as your eye is scanning the page. You don't get lost from one line to the next. And font size, I'm going to give a quick rule of thumb, which I kind of stand by, which is 9 point is about the smallest you can go to be comfortable, and that's in print. I know now we use PDFs and everyone can enlarge things. We use readers, we use a lot of tablets to read things, and that's fine. But if your product is going to go to print, you're going to want to stay above a 9 point font. Don't use the default leading. It's another one. Like give it a little more space, because that will actually make it look cleaner. There's a lot more, but those are some quick ones.
Like a don't that comes up kind of infrequently is when you have like this really pretty like image like on your page, but it's also cutting off the text. Like sometimes I think that's like intentional, but I think personally for me, I'm always wondering, like sometimes if I see like a game and it's like, oh, here's the text, but now there's claw marks through it. Ooh, spooky. But at the same time, it's like, how does that look on a screen reader? How does that read? And was I actually meant to read this? It's not like a I think the term is diegetic, like not a diegetic sort of thing where it's like, oh, this was like some researcher's last note. You don't really need to know what's at the end. But I'm thinking of like one game in particular because I was looking at it recently where you're going through and there's descriptions and there's these weird echoes around like certain words that are different words. And the whole time I was reading it, even well rested, I was like, this is kind of giving me a headache because it's like I'm reading it. It's like, here is a house, and then it says house, unhappy, happy, like that. And it's like, well, which one of these? I get the idea, but it's like it's kind of distracting in a way. Like it definitely lent to the mood and the vibe they were going for, but at the same time, it was like it might just be my neurospicy brain. It just started like sitting in the background, all those extra echoes while I was trying to read like how to play your character, how to do this, how to touch things, and it's like in the background, the little goblin is just back there chittering about happy, happy, happy. It's like, please just be quiet and have some juice.
Anything else? Okay. Someone had noted that from a DM point of view, one thing I have really liked in campaign books are notes that say this is where things might go off track with your players, or this is how to resolve those issues to be able to continue to the next part in terms of, I'm assuming, when it comes to scenario print, like when you have like a whole scenario happening that's described out, letting people know like, hey, things might get off track, but that's okay, let it ride, or here's how you can get back on track, or this is the point when things are needed to get back on track, which I think is a really cool note there. There is another question that came through that kind of fit because we brought up PDF and print and digital a little bit. What are the challenges in translating print and PDF into things like D&D Beyond or Demiplane?
I'm actually going through an issue sort of like this right now, not quite with a program like D&D Beyond, but the fact that the TTRPG that I've been developing was originally made for print, and I've sort of been working on it over the past few years, but obviously since the pandemic, everything's been online, and you can make like a Google Doc version of it and type it in there, but it's not as well optimized as it is to just write it down on a piece of paper. So I've sort of been trying to figure out how to make it more digital friendly, like the character sheets and stuff that I have for my system. So that's something that I've sort of been working on and trying to figure out for myself. Sometimes they don't always translate one for one, so I might change some things.
Yeah, hilarious. I feel like I have a unique, like I've been watching this a lot recently of like translation from we'll say like real physical books onto online versions. Like one of the examples that I've been seeing like consistently is Kids on Bikes. It recently got a transition into a virtual form of Alchemy RPG. You can go and find it. Like I think a lot of it like just went live to sell. And I'm noticing that like there are huge, like vast differences between these things because on a digital surface, not only can you like basically search for things and have more, it's I'll say easier finding. Digital pages don't have borders in the same way that like you could just keep going and going and going. So you might find that like the things that you wrote that might have felt long before are either getting like not shorter, but like
Condensed down.
Like yeah, kind of condensed down basically. Like something that is like one page, like a one pager might be actually literally 0 pages, or just like one long, like the length is going to be completely different. Like it's going like translating one to one is like not necessarily impossible, but it's one of those things where it's like it's not going to be the same thing like whatsoever at all.
Yeah.
I would say, in terms of translating print into digital, what ends up happening a lot is because as a UX UI person, I translate things into design systems in my head. So, for instance, like the concept of, oh, there's like Android operating system, Material .io, and then there's HIG, which is Apple's design system. And that's very clear how you're supposed to design things in relation to those. Think of that in relation to Powered by the Apocalypse is a design system. So then you design something on top of that and you make it modular for digital consumption. And then if there's anything custom that's unique to each game, then you just kind of fiddle with it a little bit, is the best way to put it. That's how my brain thinks of it. But some things are vastly different or very different from those like those, like not rigid, but like, oh, here's Car from Brindlewood, that's a clear system that has a clear set of things that you need to do. The Cipher system, that has a clear set of things to do. But then there's very unique ones. And then what happens with those, which can be indie, or we're just starting a new system in the first place. And that can be, that's where it might get a little tricky. But that's where it gets custom, where you have to go through and how can I make that a unique experience for the digital side of things. So I think we're still trying to figure that out as a whole of people right now, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd say resources are going to be a barrier for this kind of thing. You need to have, for example, if you're trying to port something into like a character sheet that's easy to use and clean to use on something, digital platform, you're going to need some coding, probably because they're going to use internal things to figure out, how to plug in information into their platform, right? There's a lot of digital platforms now that do tabletop. And that's something that I know that even Monica Games we're not big enough to kind of get into that. That's that because our books are already kind of in PDF and they're already in print. Even if you're just doing print and PDF, you're going to need a robust program like InDesign. I don't even think that some of the alternatives have some of the features that Acrobat and InDesign do. So in order to bookmark and tag and things, maybe there are alternatives to bookmarking directly in the PDF. So that's something. But it's going to take you time to take something that you've done in print and some little technical knowledge to be able to go in there and kind of bookmark things the way you go. So time and resources are going to be a barrier to that. That's kind of my thinking.
I would agree. Anyone else have anything for that one? All right. Next question of ours. How do we keep accessibility in mind when we are designing our games? Y'all kind of touched on a couple of those things, such as screen readers, having text font, or a text version only for reading purposes. Is there anything people should keep in mind as well when they're designing these things?
One thing to consider is to just remember that people approach a game, everyone approaches a game differently. You know, there are as many unique experiences as there are people in this world. And so you definitely you want to make like the lowest barrier of entry possible to games and game design. That doesn't mean like, when you're making a game that you're gonna, this is not even a thing, but you can't get like an A+ in accessibility, which is a good and normal thing to want, which it is. I'm being a little silly, but you just have to sort of like do the best that you can. And that's also why it's important when you're designing a game to sort of like reach out to others and ask them, like, well, what did you think? How does this look to you? That's why it's, just you have to find your community of people who are going to also have these sort of same ideas in mind towards accessibility and will be able to point out to you, hey, I noticed that this is here, but this doesn't quite, make sense, or the layout seems a little wonky, or even just, I don't know if the average person is going to know as much on this topic as you do. And you might want to either add more explanation or take this out or substitute it for like a different thing. Or even just like, hey, like even like one like bog standard basic thing you could do is like after you make a PDF, you can run it through the accessibility check in Adobe Acrobat, and that'll at least give you somewhere to start. So I do that all the time. And then from there, you can also just, do some research. At this point, it's 2024. You can definitely find like some resources and guides on like how to improve the accessibility of like your document or your game. There's plenty of talks. You'll find something.
Yeah, you'll get an A+ in accessibility if you listen to disabled people and also hire sensitivity consultants.
Yes,
That's
indeed.
exactly what I was gonna say. Which I do. On my race. No. I'm kidding. I do actually, but yes. Honestly, hire disabled people. Like there's no one who is going to be better at making sure your game is accessible to a group of people than the group of people that is affected by that thing.
Yeah, I think there are also like there are a couple different accessibility things like there are standards that like are regional for like what you're supposed to hit in terms of alt text for images and all those things. And there's also some maybe like lower A accessibility things that we were talking about earlier, like contrast. I wanted to point out something that Ambrose threw out earlier, which was like having seemingly redundant things like a quick start guide for your game, or examples of play, or things that teach people in different ways, so that like people can learn in different ways, right? Someone can learn a rulebook by like reading, like a lawyer just going through and reading the rules. Someone might learn through an example better. Someone might need that like overview chart that tells you the big steps, so that they're like, oh, okay, this is how it works. So I think trying to approach, even if you only have one game, is try to include those in different ways in your play materials. That would be an interesting one.
I agree with that one. Anything else?
I actually wanted to add real fast. One of the things I've been noticing that I really like is that people are turning their games into audiobooks. More of us should be doing that. I want to do that.
That's cool. Yeah.
Sometimes it's a lot easier to understand a
Yeah.
game if someone is reading it out to you. It just it's good. Do it.
That's a
That is really
genius
cool.
idea that I'm gonna write down.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's a big.
I
brain.
never thought about. I think that's awesome. Thank you for that. That makes so much sense.
Imagine if, oh my god, someone can
Um,
read to me. Like, I'll pay for your book any day. I'm gonna be honest.
Awesome. So we have a few more, like one more question. Well, we have two more questions. So let's see. Would it be useful to leave room in a book or file for a DM to make their own notes directly next to the rules in campaigns?
I don't DM that often, so I think I've done it twice, maybe. So I can't really speak to that. And maybe it's just because I don't know, it's just me and just I don't like writing on physical books, but I also kind of have that problem with doing it with digital books. I think it would be useful though, because I do know a lot of DMs that like to make notes. I think like my only hesitance with that is like how much space is too much space or how much space is too little space. I think one thing you could do is maybe again thinking of size constraints, you could maybe put some pages at the end for notes, but then
Yep.
you sort of run into that same issue where it's like, okay, I want to keep notes on this, but all the notes are at the back. This is actually a fascinating question because I've been experimenting with, well, toying with the idea at this stage, but I want to. I'm looking into alternative ways to play tabletop games through the program Obsidian. And so my immediate thought with this is that you could put your entire game in Obsidian, and then there's a plugin or two or something where you can make notes directly on like the rule of the campaign. It's honestly fascinating, the things you can do. So I think it's possible, but I think it sort of depends on like what medium you're working through.
I agree with that.
Yep. Yeah, I think in terms of real estate on the page, I'm sorry, that's probably not. I would say just use some sticky notepads and make your own notes. But it's going to be hard. I think it's going to be. I think there may be a good way to work that into an indie game layout as like part of the thing, right? Like it's some kind of research type game. But that's going to be a tricky ask.
Yeah, I do DM, and I what I will say is I love a GM section. Like, that's something that I'm a huge proponent of like, that I can just like scroll down and know that like this stuff is the stuff that I'm gonna read. This is the equivalent of like a DM's guide, not in separate books. You know who you are. But yeah, no, I love a GM section. I think space tends to be, I think trying to anticipate what other people would like need to write becomes a very difficult like game to play that I personally, as the king of telling people to give up, I would not try to do. Simply I like I would simply just tell them to go to the GM section and grab themselves a piece of paper. I think that's way more like open than like here's this section that you should write in, you know.
I think I agree with that, Zoe, about the just having a section for it because, like, hey, this is where players stop, and you don't know how the sausage is made for the rest of the story because it's kind of important. Specifically for horror, that's kind of important. You don't want to find out how we did that. We need to scare you. That's our job. Don't take away the magic. Don't look behind the curtain. So I agree with that. I'm going to double down on that one. Cool. Anything else? I think that like some of our questions we kind of naturally went through and answered already. So I might skip ahead to a few that we have here because we definitely talked about accessibility a little bit more and dived into that. Do we want to talk about bad design options that we've seen, or have we already trashed a few things already enough?
I think we've trashed.
I think
talked
so. I
too.
think we have
Probably.
naturally in each answer the question. What are some things that you can do when structuring writing a game that will keep users at the forefront? Do we feel like we answered that question, or is there more to be said?
I mean, I could give like one thing. I guess read books, like read other things. I feel like being a reader helps you know what a reader should want. Like if you go read something and if it feels good, like it's like hell yeah, this person gets it, you know, and then just kind of look into that.
Yeah. I'm gonna chime in here because I know that like at least for Money Cook Games we have sort of a editing pass that is of course you know, typos, that kind of thing, but there's also just like a game editing pass that needs to happen. You know, are you capitalizing too many terms, or you know, because that is a common thing when you're starting out. I think you want to capitalize all the terms, but they don't all need to be capital. Like, and you need to talk with people who know that. I think as you get involved with the game space, you'll find that there are people who know how to do game editing at sort of different levels, right? Like there's people who are going to have like high rates. There are people who can like work with you to kind of like just look at your game, give you some feedback. So get involved with the community and try to find people who can give you a game dev pass, game to edit, sort of game development edits.
So I want to say this is more on game design than any sort of visual thing, but figuring out what the core of your game looks like and what the most basic version, like what are the least amount of things you need to be able to play your game and have a good time, and then make that your base game. You don't need to make your base game overly complicated. You can have there be a base game and then you can have expansions. You can have there be a base game and some optional rules. If you want it to be accessible to the most amount of players, find the core of your mechanic, start with that, and then let the players and the GMs around the world playing your game choose what they want to add on top of that.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that.
Let's see. I had an idea for this. When it comes to these sorts of things, in terms of like writing a game, I would say that I say users like at the top, which is the storyteller and the player. Think like people aren't usually not just one or the other two. We're talking about what type of GM, what type of player examples. So, for instance, like I said, I like horror. There might be a flow to that and storytelling that versus something that's happy-go-lucky or high fantasy or all that stuff. Something that has heavy lore versus something that doesn't have heavy lore. A high politics game that also has horror elements and vampires or werewolves or mages. That does also inform the decision of how things are being digested by people and what kind of like story you want to tell. Some things leave room for high role play and less crunch. Some have more crunch. and that's what you're going to lean on more. But the role play is optional and stuff like that. So like those things shift how someone interacts with them, and you're going to learn that as you're play testing, as you're playing the game, and that's why there's additions. You realize those things and you add different like don't be scared to add those versions, or as Radiant G said, to add like expansions or things on top of that, because like the digital world, things will always have updates and changes, and things will always change. Some things will become obsolete, unfortunately, or like, hey, we tried, but let's try something else, and that's okay. And we need to be okay with that, is what I would say. I feel like I missed a question, and I apologize. Oh, did anyone else have any other questions, answers to this question?
I actually came up with another thing, if I
Ooh.
can. Yeah, my GM brain started ticking, and I just want to add on. It would be really cool if more games had in their rulebook how best to set up a session 0 for that game to make sure your players are comfortable, to make sure that your players are getting set up with what they need for success, and where their comfort levels are with other players and subject matter. I think it's something that I'd really like to see more often.
Yeah, session 0 guide. That's smart.
That's really smart, and I've seen it a couple times. I've seen it in Car from Brindlewood. Like they have like a session 0 setup, from safety all the way down to how you set up the characters and how that like informs the decisions of the world and stuff like that. And I thought that was pretty brilliant. And yes, please do it. People that write games and make games, y'all are cool. Add more cool stuff. One more question, and then anyone that had any questions left over, I'm going to try to see what we can do with that to answer them. So stay tuned. But would plain text, or I'm trying to remember if this is the one. Oh, as TTRPGs books are both instructional and reference text, how do you balance both of these demands?
Let's see. So I'm gonna jump in here and say that like I love, one of the things I really enjoy about like Monte Cook Games books right now is, and they've been doing this for a while now, is that they looked at a lot of non-books like education books and like travel guides, and developed a way of having a margin for callouts. And so this is kind of our style. So we have 2 columns for the body copy, and we have a third, like a half column, that has these page references. More about this on page X. GM intrusion, idea for this scenario that's happening here. For maybe a quick little, this monster is going to be this level and have these items in it. And I think that's a really, really cool thing that, if you use it as margin, or if you use it as box text, like in that page, maybe you don't have the real estate to have margins. Sometimes, that can eat up a lot of space. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing.
Mm-hmm. Any other answers to that one? We might have
Again, sidebars.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, just like I think in terms of like it being a reference material, sometimes like a nice, I just like sidebars. It's that Marge Simpson meme. Just think they're neat. Like you could just have one off in the corner for reference.
Yeah.
I think I tend to lean more towards instructional than reference when I'm making a book, but that might just be me and my academia brain.
Yeah, and what I did for my system was having a rules section and then a glossary section that you can use for reference later.
Awesome. Straight and to the point, everybody. So yes, thank you so much for watching us, jumping in, watching everything that we had, because this was a wonderful conversation and I wish we had more time. I noted your questions, and I think they're rad. I'm going to try to find a way to get them answered and probably put it on social so y'all can see it. But I am Ambrose. I go by she, they pronouns. You can find me everywhere as SS Ambrose _ or SS Ambrose, because apparently Twitter and Instagram hate me and I need to put the underscore there, and that makes me upset. But that is how it is. I am the creative director and founder of Other Side of Studios. So check us out. We do horror and mystery. And Javier, you go.
My name is Javier Beltran. I am a graphic designer for Monte Cook Games. That's my website. Check out Monte Cook Games. I'm a digital hermit, so I'm not online much. But but maybe you can find me out there somewhere. I don't post that often or stuff, so but that's me.
Okay, cool. And I'll Basil, but also, by the way, there's the BBO Discord, and we'll put any discussions there for questions, which is great. Basil.
Yep. So I've been Basil, as opposed to Javier. I'm chronically online. My pronouns are he, they, z. You can find me on Twitter as @Kobanyukana. Same thing on Instagram, but I only use that for giveaways. You can find me everywhere else: Tumblr, Pillowfort, and Blue Sky as @Kobanya. I am a game designer and sensitivity consultant, and I've had a lot of fun here today.
Sweet. Zoe.
Hello, everyone. I am Zoe and Radical Zoe Online. I recently had a name change, so if you can't find me, honestly, can't help you. I spilled something on myself. I lost all train of thought out of the goddamn window. I am a game designer, performer, so many things. You will find me. Unlike Basil, unlike Javier, I'm in the middle. I'm kind of online sometimes. If you need me, you will be able to reach me online, but you won't find me on there a lot. I'm done.
And last but certainly not least, Radiant Chi.
Hello again, I'm Radiant G, he, him. You can find me on Twitter @RadiantG_. I am chronically online and I use Twitter like boomers use Facebook. So find me there, follow me, join in the conversation.
Amazing. And with that, that's us, everyone. Please take care, and I hope you learned something amazing from this panel. Bye, everybody.